Today was a big day. Today was a big day because we finally got to see what the Philadelphia Flyers are really going to put on the ice this year. Now, there were plenty of players available to kind of pick from, but the Flyers finally announced training camp today. We were good to go. The team was already back together, back on the ice, but now we can make it official. The lines started to take form, and we're going to look at the lines. We're going to talk about the lines today. We're going to talk about a little bit of Flyers news, but I really just wanted to get this little rant out because the way I feel about it, it's kind of a fresh new season. You know, I have this kind of nervous energy in my belly because, you know, the Flyers have had a history of being a slow starting team. And I don't want to say all throughout history, but definitely of the modern era, up until the AV years. And that's kind of where we are today. And I want to talk about why this team is different than that team. You know, the team of the past, they would start, they would crumble. They wouldn't do well in the early portions of games, in the early portion of the season, in the early portion of coming back from a break. Pretty much getting going was always an issue for this team. Today, I think we find ourselves in a very, very, very different position. The Philadelphia Flyers today are a different squad. And I think the moment that you can really see it's not the same thing is that we saw the Philadelphia Flyers go on a streak at the end of this season that didn't just include beating teams. It included dominating teams in must-win games. And it might not have been domination on a scoreboard, but just the overall games. They were never a point down there in the stretch up until they lost to Boston that they were going to lose those games. I mean, people were waiting for, okay, when is the other shoe going to drop, right? When are things going to change? When is this team going to roll back into the team that we've seen in the past? And quite frankly, that day never came. What we ended up happening was we saw the Flyers go back-to-back home wins consistently over and over and over again. All throughout the season, we saw the Flyers kind of have a really good team, put up a lot of really solid efforts. You know, we saw streaks from players, but they never were on a roll fully all at once. Like in the very beginning, Oscar Lindblom and Travis Konecny were doing primarily most of the scoring. Ghost was obviously not having a great year. Provorov was actually starting off pretty strong. But then G and Couturier and Voracek and even Hayes at times, these guys were not lighting up the scoreboard. And it was kind of a concern. I mean, the Flyers weren't playing poorly in a sense, but they weren't playing well. Offensively, at least. They weren't putting up points. They were playing a more structured games than they have in the past, and they were winning, and things felt good, but you were concerned that scoring would kind of dry up as the season went on, but that's not what we saw. We saw a team that really was kind of morphing through the evolution of their transition into the AV years, and that's kind of where we find ourselves today. That's how we got to the point where the Flyers were dominating games at the end of the end of the season. They didn't just dominate them, they dominated them in games where these teams were competing with them to make the playoffs themselves. And we were talking about home and home bouts here, where they had opportunities to kind of face teams home twice, and they still came away with the win. When have you seen not just the Flyers do that, but other teams do that? Cup contenders tend to do that. But I can't remember a Flyers team that has done that, quite frankly. Maybe the Primo era, maybe the Lindros era, really. But, you know, after that, we just haven't had the talent. We haven't been able to pull something like that off. And let's just start off. So we lost to Tampa Bay, but like I'm just going to go to the month of February right before we stop. So we started off the first month there. That was a 6-3 win. Against Colorado, obviously no joke of a team. Then a 3-0 win on the third against Detroit, one of the worst teams in the league, but again, a shutout, nice clean victory. Then we lose to New Jersey 5-0, right? That seems like something the Flyers of the old would do. But then those teams would usually roll maybe into an inconsistent pace from there. Nope. Next game, they play a better team, the Washington Capitals. They win 7-2. The following game, they play on the 10th. They play Florida Panthers. They win 4-1. Then they play the Islanders the next day, lose 5-3 in a difficult loss of a game. We all remember that. Then again, they play Florida. They win 6-2. Then play the Lightning 5-3. And then all of a sudden, this is the Flyers of the past, right? It's about 50-50. But then this is where the change happened. Now, mind you, I was only playing a stretch there, and really they were playing well before that. So it's not that they were actually a 500 team, but they were already having kind of good games prior to that, and then kind of going back and forth. But they weren't taking that jump. But then those must-win games kind of came up, and it was the first game, the 18th, February 18th, against Columbus. The Flyers ended up winning that game 5-1, and then that is a huge game because Columbus is chasing the Flyers. This is a must-win game, and this is a situation where you know that the Flyers have to win these games. And maybe the team in the past, you were worried that they hopefully would win one of those games, or that they'd win one of them in regulation, the other one in overtime, right? You kind of want to squeak by, and that's kind of what we started seeing from the Flyers. That game on the 18th, the Flyers win 5-1 against Columbus Blue Jackets. Then you think, oh, Columbus is going to come home. They're going to try to take that game from the Flyers. Flyers tend to lose that bounce-back game, kind of wash it out, and then they continue riding down the season at 500. Nope, Flyers win that one in overtime. The following game, then they play Winnipeg. They win again, 4-2. Then they play the Sharks on the 25th, a few days later. 4-2 again. Then they play the New York Rangers. Another big game, chasing them in the standings. Not a huge game for the Rangers, kind of. These are teams that are kind of trying to make the playoffs at this point. Definitely trying, but the Flyers, they felt kind of safe, but they have these teams chasing them, right? So they beat the Rangers, and then they beat the Rangers again in a back-to-back game. That is unheard of. That's where things start getting weird, right? Listen to these games I just said. It's Columbus Blue Jackets home and home. Then they beat Winnipeg. Then they beat San Jose. Then they beat the Rangers in a home and home. Again, 2 home and homes there. Then they go on to beat the Capitals. Then they go in a must-win game. Then go on to beat the Carolina Hurricanes in a must-win game. Then just beat Buffalo Sabres just because they can. And then right before COVID attacks the entire season, the Flyers lose a hard-fought battle to the Boston Bruins 2-0. And again, maybe that was kind of a crash back to earth, but honestly, it was a trend of something special, and you saw a team instilling their will on the opposition. And I think this team is capable of doing that. They can get back. They might be missing Patrick and Lindblom, but they have those additional talent picked up at the trade deadline. They have a slew of young talent, black aces now of Frost, Zamula, Rubtsov, Farabee. I can even call him a roster player at this point. And we just keep on going. There's enough guys that can really compete. Bunneman, Torensky, these are guys who can compete at the NHL level. They have some veterans names, so they can kind of go depth-wise. They didn't have anybody opt out. So they're looking good. They're looking good for a good playoff run. I think we're all excited about a playoff run. And goddamn, it's good for the hockey season to be back.